Hello, everyone. Welcome to Minority Mavericks. This is Angel Leon, your host. And this is the show where we tell a story of every single minority entrepreneur, founder, and investor of this world. And in today's show, I have the pleasure to have James Norman, and he is the founder of Pilotly. Welcome to the show, James.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, James. Thank you for being on the show. And just to get started, as usual, right? As with any kind of interview, right, and podcast out there, let's just get started with the basics and introduce yourself to the audience and the origins of Pilotly, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem. As you said, I'm James Norman, co-founder of Pilotly. It's a market research platform that helps organizations around the world test their creative content with their audience. But well before we were testing TV shows for the biggest content creators and streamers in the world, um, I've been building companies online since '95. So I've just been a serial entrepreneur my whole life. Um, kind of spent my first portion of my life in the automotive industry, designing cars, building cars, stuff like that, working on sets like movies like The Fast and the Furious. Um, but then around '07, '08, I ended up pivoting over to building streaming video platforms, which I think was a
Okay.
result of my proximity to Hollywood at the time, and
Okay.
then my perspective on what the future of cable TV was. So I just began building in that space. And so my first foray into video was Ubi, which was a streaming video platform that was an electronic programming guide, kind of like you see on a cable box. But it was based on the web, first one, and it streamed video from all sources into one personalized experience. So like that was like the onset of me trying to build a real tech company. And I learned a lot of lessons there. Wasn't the best CEO, didn't have the best co-founder situation going on, and
Right.
didn't have the best investor involved. Not hiring the, we just didn't have the best situation, but we did build a product that thousands of people watch TV on, and
Mhm.
eventually got IP acquisition offer. And so once, once I was here in the Bay, then I decided to try and do another one, which was GroupFlix. And GroupFlix was going to be an a la carte TV service around 2013, 14. So a lot of hype around that then. That was back when Apple was first trying to get into TV, as was Google Fiber. But the studios were afraid just because like what they had done with iTunes and Google Play and
Yeah.
all that, they didn't want to mess up their monetization. So I saw an opening to like manipulate what at the time was basically called the iTunes contract. It's where you buy these episodes or buy these seasons, like $2, $3, $15. And I manipulated that to create what felt like a la carte TV to the end user by packaging episodes together and packaging seasons together. So um, this time when we built that product, now I had basically been given a lot of knowledge around how startups are built by some of the best people that have ever done it. And so I knew I needed to have this kind of team around me that would be trusted. So I kind of got my friends together who went to MIT and Stanford and built this team, built the product out in like a few months, no money. And then I got 1,000 people signed up to the platform in 8 days with credit cards.
Wow.
So people were ready to use the platform, could not raise money for it. And that's when I realized that I was not walking the same path as my friends
Hmm.
who were in Silicon Valley, building literally billion-dollar companies. Um, so that sparked a couple things. Um, First thing was I got together with a childhood friend of mine who had a similar experience, pretty much parallel, and we created Transparent Collective, which is a nonprofit accelerator that helps women and people of color gain access to resources they need to scale their companies.
Okay.
Um, so in 2021, if you were to look at the numbers of people who had raised capital who were black, like Transparent Collective was, almost responsible for 10% of that amount of people who
Hmm.
had ever raised venture capital. So it's a pretty effective program, doesn't take any equity, and it has about a 60% funding rate of people who graduate from it. So, anyways, created that in 2015, and that's still running today. And then ended up pivoting GroupFlix, went back to the studios that I had contracts with, and it was like, hey guys, sorry, the money didn't come. But let me tell you about the data I was going to give you, because companies like Hulu, companies like Netflix, they're not giving up that data because it's their leverage in like negotiations. I didn't need that leverage
Right.
because I was operating on like a set price that I was able to create my own margin on top of.
Mm. Right.
So
Right.
I want to offer up the data as a subscription. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so in those conversations, I learned about market research in very targeted areas like Burbank, California, Vegas, Orlando, places where they felt like people traveled so they could capture multiple different kinds of people. The thing about it is like the world was changing and now it has changed completely. But at that
Right.
time,
Right.
it was like 20 years ago, you could pick me up for a focus group in the MGM in Vegas.
Hmm.
I'm not on my phone. I'm not in a hurry to get too many places. I'm just maybe doing some gambling, walking somewhere. There's not a club to go to. There's just not as much going on. So you can capture people's attention, right? So you get a wide variety of
Right.
people. Nowadays, there's only so many people walking around that you can actually take their time. Time's so valuable, right?
Hmm.
And so I knew that one, you weren't able to get all the people in those specific places, but two, content was going to become global. So if you weren't doing this online, doing this type of market research online to better understand audiences, then you would not be able to get the right information.
Right.
So that's how we ended up pivoting GroupFlix to become Pilotly. And, just built that out, ended up getting 500 startups, raising a small amount of money. And, here we are today, about 8 years later.
That's awesome. Yeah. And to kind of complement your point there, there was actually a study that came out in 2023. We only had about 1% actually of VC funded companies that were black owned.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very very low percentage at these time and ages. And just overall, the whole minority group basically it's basically just about 5% of the entire allocation for funding that's out there. So I see, you have a very similar story, right? That a lot of other guests in this show, and funding is a very very like obvious one so far among
Yeah.
all of you guys. Has been that one has been the one that is always constant. It's always the story behind how is it that a black owned or a minority owned or a Latino owned, whatever, right? A type of company can build, for example, a follower base and can build clients, but then they can get funding from VCs.
Yeah.
Even proving, right, that they can actually do it, right, because they're presenting
Yeah.
the information, they're presenting the data, presenting the clients, and they're still struggling with that. So it's a very interesting, again, type of denominator that's being constant amongst all guests in the show.
Yeah. I think key word from everything you just said is proven. So like
Hmm.
um, there's inherently a challenge. Now a challenge, nah, it doesn't really shift too much. I mean, I'm hoping to
Right.
shift it with some of the venture work I'm doing. But a lot of people, even if you're a person of color, typically if you've gotten the position to, deploy capital, you've typically gone to school around the white elite and you kind of adopted some of their mechanisms for how they do business. So it
Right.
doesn't make too much of a difference when you are, necessarily a Latino person deploying capital, black person deploying capital, if all you know is Ivy League, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not always gonna be a tremendous difference. But when I say proven, because um, there's inherently you're inherently at disadvantage when you're trying to prove to someone that you're worthy of their capital,
Right.
right? So like, and that's just inherent. And like, when you move around the world in a place where so many think there's so many barriers for you, um, you tend to try and overachieve and prove your worth in different spaces. And in this space, it just doesn't calculate out
Right.
because it creates a power dynamic where the VC feels completely in control, and that's not typical for them when they're you know, uh, used to seeing founders that, believe that they should be receiving that type of conversation from the VC side, right? If you
Right.
build in the future, you believe it's the future. When you're having that conversation, it comes off differently. When you're just like, I'm talking to this person, this person, this person. You sound interesting, but let me know if you're really interested. I'm happy to go do this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
For this different conversation than, all right, so what else are you looking for? Blah, blah, blah. Like you're trying to appease them. That automatically puts you in a bad situation. But I think the real challenge also then is like because of the bias that exists, quite unintentionally. Like there's just very 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 few VCs out there who are like, oh, I don't know if black people can do this. You know, like that's not something someone would say for the most part.
Okay.
I don't know if Latino people can do this. You know, but what happens is when you're building something, you come in and pitch it, the bar automatically increases because of things they don't inherently believe about you, right?
Okay.
It doesn't seem unless you have some proxy by which that like you can shift that intrinsic belief where you're like, oh, I did my master's in CS at Stanford with some professor, you know. Well, now, you know, I'm feeling a little bit different about your ability to build something versus if you were just like, I taught myself to program and this is what I built,
Right.
right? Um, so it just changes the perspective. And so then what happens is you're like, all right, that was a great conversation. They're like, yeah, we like to see X, Y, Z. And so you go do X, Y, Z, right? Every time, you know, like you
Mhm.
go do it. And you'll come back and they'll be like, oh man, it's still not a fit. You know, I'm sorry. Like, you know, let me know when you do your next thing. Like, because the thing about it is when you don't get funded up front, the timeline's begun. Now, when you don't have any
Right.
funding at all, you can always reframe things. You can be like, oh yeah, yeah, no, we just tack around, you know, we're just messing around. Now we pivoted, now we starting, right? You can, but once you raise some money, the timeline started, and so
Right.
if you raise a pre-seed like 250, 300, you can't get nowhere with it, and you need more money. It's gonna be a hard road because it's all about rate of change. So
Hmm.
like you raised a pre-seed 4 years ago, and now you're trying to raise a seed. Good luck, unless you change the world with
Right.
the things you built over the past 4 years, because like stuff that becomes worth $1 billion moves fast,
Definitely.
right? And that's the game they're playing. So you automatically get disadvantaged when the market's biased. You don't get that strong amount of initial capital you need. And then when you show back up with the proof points, of course it took you longer. You weren't funded nor guided,
Right.
right? But then they're like, I don't know if it's hot. Well, it's not hot because you never even gave it a chance to be hot. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
Um,
it's almost like they purposely make you miss the boat. You know, um, every every
right.
time that they come
They
out
don't know
with
any better. You know what I
new
mean?
different thing, it's like yeah, you miss that boat, and then by the time you get to the next boat, right, and you present your another XYZ, then there goes another one, and just keep missing and missing and missing the boats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
So that's just how it goes, man. Same story for Pilotly. You know,
Hmm.
like get a small amount of funding and trying to figure it out. You go make some money, more money than anybody else who had that much money made,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you know, but I don't know I don't know if there's enough customers. There's always something, right? And you start to prove those things out, and it's like well, you know, I still don't know this X Y. Like it'll be constant. Like, and part of that is storytelling. The other part of that is the time it took you to do something. Like how
definitely.
hype is it? You know,
Hmm.
is that train moving so fast that like I might hurt myself jumping on it. It's moving so fast. If
Right,
I could just hop on the train and hop back off, that's for kids, right?
right, right, right.
But this is the real thing. I might kill myself trying to hop on this train. Like that's the
Definitely.
type of situation these investors are looking for, and it's just hard to create that when you don't have great capital.
Definitely, definitely, and besides capital and there's definitely other challenges, right, as well, and that minority groups tend to have. Some of the ones that that I've heard in this show specifically have been, yes, definitely capital, just access to resources is another one. Access to people in general, it's another type of thing that for some reason, right, we just have issues with, like automatically just we get defined by this risk, right, and that risk alone just kind of postpones the meetings, right, over and over, and that's something that it needs to change, right. That perception that we have for minority groups has definitely has to change in order for us to be equal, right, and have the same opportunities, same access that everyone else has. And with Pilotly though, and just to talk a little bit more about just diversity and inclusion here within Pilotly, that of course you as the leader and founder of it, founders, right, they sort of somehow express themselves, right, through their startups, This is their view, right? This is their vision. This is their goals, their missions. So there's a lot of a founder in that startup. And would you like to share, for example, like how do you think that Pilotly, right, is addressing or supporting, right, diversity and inclusion within your ecosystem?
Um, I mean, I'll say, in our ecosystem, you know, past few years have been interesting in general, because of new distribution outlets like an Apple TV and the way Netflix has been moving and stuff like that. There has inherently been bigger opportunity for people to put their voice out there. So you've seen more Asian creators, more Black creators, more Hispanic, Latino creators, kind of be able to get their content out in the world. So that's just been happening in general. From a Pilotly standpoint as an organization, we kind of pride ourselves on, searching far and wide for a variety of people, just because we're in the world of understanding people. So if we
Hmm.
don't have a variety of people on the team, then you just won't be as good at it. You know, so having diversity in our team is imperative to being the best in the market at what we do.
Right.
Um, so I keep that stuff in mind. And then, even when we're out there supporting people in the content they're creating, you know, oftentimes, even though it might be like a Black creator or something, it still goes through the hands of other people who don't have as much cultural context.
Hmm.
So, be able to be a part of that conversation, um, and not only present, what could subjectively be our internal opinion, but be able to like show actual audience data and corroborate it, really helps people make better decisions around what comes out on television. Or like,
Hmm.
even when you have content that isn't so diversely focused, but you know, like I'll give you a good example. You look at something like Killers of the Flower Moon. Like
Okay.
Scorsese did that, and like had it been done in its original format, probably would come off as well. It would come off maybe as like a white savior story, something of that nature. And so like they took a lot of time with that to like think through what would be the approach to get the story across, have the biggest impact, and
Right.
it got reframed. From a perspective of like, uh, you know, these Native American people who are like kings and queens, and these white people who are like serfs, and like how they were, warring, kind of, in a sense for this capital. It just gave a different perspective to what the story would have been. You know,
Hmm.
it would not have shown the greatness of the people that were already there, and the evil of the people that took it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So taking the time to like coalesce stories into a format that deliver the most impactful message is kind of like what we're all about.
That's very, very cool. And it's interesting to that the creators, right, that are out there right now. I would say that, and this is just a personal opinion, but I do believe that basically the creator landscape out there is actually being led by minority groups right now.
Mm-hmm.
Music, right? It's another one that just we have a lot of minority people, right? Minority artists that are on the top charts right now, right? And it's kind of weird though, right? That how more and more minority creators are putting their voices out there, and still the other the back end, right, that backstage of the industries, right, they're not
Mm-hmm.
changing, right? And it's good that we're putting our voices out there, right, and all that, and most importantly, right, there's a lot of other groups right now forming up, right, for minority groups and VCs and other people that are trying to kind of like help each other in some sort of way. And that's definitely something that that is going to help change. But it's just it's a little amazing to me, really, just to think to the fact that how is it that we as minorities, right, we can entertain and drive so much capital, right, and so
Mm-hmm.
much like sales, um Yeah, we have to prove things. And
Yeah,
that's
I
the
mean,
part that
it's
just
also
like it amazes me, right?
yeah, it's just also a disconnect. General population. It's just been so much marketing over the past, not up till now. It's a little bit it's dulled down now, but you look like pre 2010 and back to like the 60s. There's so much marketing around what's good for you, what makes sense, what's societally right. There's so much positioning around these things, and so something that's a position that has been posed is, athletes are jocks. They're dumb jocks.
Right, right.
There's um, there's musicians, artists. They're out there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like there's these perspectives. If you're an engineer, oh man, like you are smart, right?
Right,
I know
right.
dumb engineers. I know genius artists. Artists. I
Right,
know great business people who only play basketball for their main main source of income. Like um, it's a disconnect in that I think people have to realize to perform at the level of a Rihanna, a LeBron James, over to a Drew Houston at Dropbox, you have to
mhm,
be a genius.
right.
You can't perform at those levels, right? Like it's one thing to be able to sing, that's one thing. It's another thing to be able to perform and sing with the proper breath control at the same time and do that over a period of time. It's another thing to be able to have a perspective on the choreography and the design and the sonics of a piece of content, right? In
Right.
the same way, like when someone makes art, it's one thing to just throw a bunch of things on paper and call it art. It's another thing to like have a thought process around it that ends with an end product that multiple people can have an appreciation for from different perspectives. Like, these things are
Definitely.
not easy to do. People naturally, definitely have natural born talents around certain things, but you don't really get to use that talent at its maximum level without like your 10,000 hours in and being
Exactly.
extremely intelligent. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, when, a person comes to Silicon Valley as an artist and tries to get advice as a business person, they might not get the proper respect. They might just,
Mhm.
people want to hang out with them because they're a celebrity.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a major disconnect. And, for me personally, I plan to take advantage of it because people aren't utilizing some of the best minds in the world. They're just watching them on television. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, definitely,
There's
definitely.
like there's big opportunity there that people are overlooking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And that's it's a misconception, yeah. And like you said, that's basically, well, that should be something that us as minority people and our listeners out there, any aspiring entrepreneurs out there as well, to use these things in your advantage more than take it as an offense, or just take it as another roadblock, right? These are the things that kind of feed us, right, to be
Hmm.
greater. It kind of feed us to be more creative, and ultimately, part of, again, what I was mentioning before, that I feel that create the creator landscape, right, is led by minorities right now. um it's because minorities also have to be creative in many other
Hmm.
ways throughout, right, to be able to survive, not just
Right.
in business, but in life, day-to-day life stuff, right? We
Right.
always have
So it
to
just
figure things
transfers.
out. Right, be creative, right? Just to because we don't fit that mold, we don't fit in that box, right? So we always have to think
Hmm.
outside that box, and I feel that that's just an innate skill that we have ever since we're little, and we grow up like that. We always grow up, and go through our lives with that in mind, and that kind of, I believe, right, makes us a lot more creative than other groups, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
And with Pilotly, how do you guys stay ahead, right, in this evolving landscape of content? So how do you guys you know understand, right, and maybe project out, right, certain things that could potentially happen, and how do you guys then quantify that?
So for us, like, um, you know, we're always looking at where the market's going, the current condition of the market, and where we can best fit. When we think about where can Pilot have the most effect, we don't think about it just like domestically. We think about it like globally. So kind of look into the trends where where content can be most impactful and where people want to make sure the messaging is as precise as possible. And we lean our resources towards that and grow our team accordingly around that as well. So that's kind of how we look at it. Organizationally, we're always just, you know, tapping into the team and seeing who's in their network as well. Because once you get it's the easy part. If you don't get a diverse group of people, it becomes challenging to like diversify. But if you got a diverse group, you just constantly doubling down to people got with you.
Right.
So they got people in their network and keep expanding, and you can go from there.
Definitely. That's awesome. That's awesome, James. And just before we wrap up here, it's been great to having you in the show. It's been great to understand yet another perspective, right, directly from right from the minority mouth, right. The whole idea of this show is to do that, right, to present every single story, minority story that I can out there. And so your story has been great. Again, same context, right, in terms of challenges that we all face. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to the fact that you are actually an example, right, of how minority can actually make it, how minorities can actually navigate through any kind of industries, right, and be as successful as anyone else. So again, really appreciate to have you on the show. So again, everyone, this was James Norman, and again, he's the founder of Pilotly, an amazing tool that's helping a lot of people out there, a lot of companies out there to generate a lot of different type of analytics out of videos and content, and helping also content creators understand a lot more about their own content. So again, James Norman from Pilotly, he's the founder. He's also a minority, and he was able to navigate all these different challenges. And again, this is Angel Leon, your host, and this was Minority Mavericks, the show where we tell the story of every single minority entrepreneur, founder, and investor of this world. See you next time.